The white sand held the heat of the afternoon. Aplina and her friends lay still, listening to the rhythmic pulse of the tide. The atmosphere was heavy, quiet, and perfectly undisturbed. Then, the sky tore open. A chrome hovercraft punched through the clouds, descending with a roar that drowned out the surf. It slammed into the shoreline, throwing a wall of sand across the beach. The hatch hissed and dropped. Wuxi stepped out, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She did not wait for questions. She held up a digital map, the red coordinates pulsing against the daylight. "The insectoid swarm has breached the perimeter," she said. Her voice cut through the lingering drone of the engines. "I need pilots. Now." Aplina stood, shaking the sand from her hands. Pina, Sarina, and Vamp followed, moving toward the craft without a word. They stepped into the dark interior of the ship. The hatch sealed shut. The engines surged, and the beach vanished into a blur of blue. The hovercraft docked with a metallic thud at Wuxi Base, a fortress suspended in the silent void. The hangar doors slid open, revealing a cavernous space filled with the smell of ozone and burnt grease. Wuxi gestured toward the assembly bays. "Build your own defense," she commanded. The four friends moved to their stations. Aplina grabbed a heavy-duty laser array, bolting it to her chassis, until the metal groaned under the pressure. Pina worked the hydraulic presses, integrating a high-speed thruster system that hummed with potential energy. Sarina focused on the kinetic plating, welding each sheet with steady, deliberate movements. Vamp stood at the sensor array, his fingers dancing across the interface to calibrate the swarm targeting logic. The air grew thick with the sound of welding torches and the rhythmic strike of hammers. For hours, they worked without pause. A spark flew from Sarina's torch, catching the edge of a cooling vent, but she extinguished it with a single, sharp motion. The final bolts were tightened. Their custom mechs stood in the hangar lights, gleaming and ready. The hangar floor dropped away. 4 streaks of light tore through the vacuum, leaving the metallic shell of Wuxi Base behind. Space was a vast, crushing emptiness. Inside the cockpits, the only sound was the rhythmic intake of oxygen and the low-frequency thrum of thrusters pushing against the void. Aplina checked her monitor. The screen displayed nothing but static and the cold, distant glow of stars. They drifted through the dark, the silence so absolute it felt like a physical weight pressing against the hull. Then, the sensors flickered. A jagged, irregular signal spiked across the interface. Aplina adjusted the gain, her hands steady despite the sudden spike in her heart rate. Ahead, the red glow of Mars began to bleed into the darkness. It was not the planet they expected. The surface was obscured by a shifting, writhing mass. It was a cloud of metallic geometry, thousands of individual units pulsing in a synchronized, lethal rhythm. As they closed the distance, the swarm reacted. The scale of the threat became clear in an instant. The swarm surged forward, a wall of blades, and the silence was replaced by the frantic whine of targeting systems. The first wave hit like a physical shockwave. Aplina triggered her laser array, a searing beam of light carving a jagged path through the front line of drones. Metal shards erupted into the void. Pina banked hard, her thrusters leaving long, spiraling trails of fire as she danced through the gaps in the swarm. The drones responded with a synchronized surge, their pincers snapping against the hull of the mechs. Sarina held the center, her kinetic shields glowing bright violet. A massive drone slammed into her plating, the force buckling the metal and sending a shudder through her frame. She stabilized, redirected power, and pushed back. Vamp locked onto the swarm's central coordination node, his sensors screaming with data. He fired a pulse, disabling the drone's formation. The battle turned into a chaotic blur of sparks and spinning debris. Aplina and Pina converged, their combined fire tearing through the remaining clusters. The swarm faltered. The synchronized rhythm broke. One by one, the drones turned away, their thrusters flaring as they retreated into the deep, jagged shadows. The void returned to its cold, hollow state. They drifted in the low gravity, watching the red planet spin silently below, their mechs scarred and smoking. The docking clamps of Wuxi Base hissed as they locked onto the battered frames. Aplina, Pina, Serena, and Vamp climbed from their cockpits, their movements stiff from the long, high-gravity engagement. Smoke curled from the scorched plating of their mechs, drifting into the hangar's filtered air. Wuxia approached, her boots echoing against the metal floor. She held a jagged, glowing component salvaged from a downed drone. She tapped the pulsing core, and the light flickered, casting long, rhythmic shadows across the hangar walls. "These insects," she said, her voice cutting through the hum. "They are not just machines. They are self-replicating probes sent from a dying star." She held the core toward them, the light reflecting in their eyes. "And they are just the scouts." The hangar went silent.